Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic, and honestly, I'm so grateful to be here with you guys today. And it's so lovely to see so many like familiar faces and just genuinely people that I love and I care about from literally all over the world. And man, I'm biased, but I love the heck out of Zoom, and I love the heck out of all you guys too. That's how I was planning on starting this thing, by the way. All right, so what I have the privilege of talking about step two and the second step. And I don't know about you guys. I'm sure that you guys came to like AA or to 12 step it as some sort of spiritual giants. And you were able to like really grasp and understand and never once overthought the second step at all. But I did those things. And what I'll do is I'll share my experience kind of with wrestling with and misunderstanding and overcomplicating and overthinking the second step and all the barriers that I felt like I had to the second step. And we'll bounce around the book a little bit too, because for those that know me know that I love to do big book bounce around. So that's something we're going to do. And so the first thing that happened for me is I saw that second step and I overcomplicated the heck out of it. And if you are like, man, I don't like this Paige girl, I'm going to log off. Before you go, let me explain the second step really, really simply, and then you're free to go. So if you don't take anything else from this talk, this is what the second step is about. It says that we came to believe that, not even came to believe in, but we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves. First and foremost, can I believe that there is a power greater than myself? I don't need to know it. I don't need to like it. I don't need to understand it. I don't need to anything like that. But can I believe that there is a power that is more powerful than me? There's a power greater than myself. And then it says, could restore us to sanity. Can I believe that that power that I just kind of sort of maybe, hopefully, maybe a little bit believe in could relieve for me the insane thought that I have to take that first drink? Do I believe that's possible? And the bar that was so low for somebody like me, all I had to do was come to rooms like this and see wonderful people like you and see that you were sober and happy at the same time, that the miracle had happened to you. And all I needed to believe was that I wasn't so special, so terminally unique, that it could not happen for me too. Okay, you guys can leave. Bye. I'm just kidding. Steve's like, please don't do that, Paige. But again, self-centered, overcomplicated, overthinking alcoholic, I overthought it. And I had these barriers to belief in a power greater than myself. And I had the perception of barriers to belief in a power greater than myself. And so let's bounce around the book because it's one of my favorite things to do. If you have your book to hand, awesome. If you don't worry about it. I'm going to read it anyways. So here are some examples of barriers that I might have to a belief in a power greater than myself. It's the very bottom paragraph of page 45. And keep in mind, I can look and I can ask, is this my experience? Because if it is, you are not alone. And that we have a way to overcome these barriers. So the first barrier, it talks about we know how he feels, right? It's that idea of like, ooh, this God idea. I hope I neatly evaded that or entirely ignored that. We're like, yeah, I hear you. We're going to meet you where you're at. It says some of us have been violently anti-religious. Has that been my experience? Have I been anti-religious? Do I hear? And then it says, to others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. To another barrier that I have is this idea that maybe God was pushed on me, God was forced on me, and I don't like the God of my childhood. Maybe I come with this conception of a punishing, angry, punitive God that could not love somebody like me. Or maybe I came with this old idea of God as a little like a Santa Claus God. You know, a bearded guy that lives in the sky way over there. And if I'm good, I'll get good things. And if I'm bad, I'll get coal in my spiritual stocking. You know what I mean? Do I have those as barriers? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, right? It says, perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. with this rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. I don't believe in that sort of God, or I don't believe in the God that you're talking about. I don't need to believe in anything. I'm good. I don't need to. And it says we were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a capital P power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. Was I worried about what people would think about me? Did I not want to be weak and dependent on another person or another, and not a person, definitely not a person, but another entity? Did I not want to have another dependency? But also, I'll talk a little about this. I was real attached to the idea of being, actually, you know what? I'll talk about it right now. I'm off on a tangent. I feel the tangent going. Here we go. Let's go. I was attached to the idea of being cool. Now, for those who are wondering, I did get sober quite young. And some of you are like, girl, what are you, 12? I mean, emotionally, clearly, but I got sober quite young. And one of the things that I was really attached to, and maybe, you know, those of us who are or have been young, we know that feeling. I was attached to this idea of being cool. You know, I come to, you know, these church basements, hanging out with you guys with, you know, the coffee in the styrofoam cup and the coffee creamer that floats to the top of the surface. But I got to be cool, you know. And that whole God idea, that's not cool. I also want to point out, if you're like, Paige, what sort of cool things were you up to in your drinking? Not much. I was pissing my pants behind a dumpster. That's the cool stuff I was doing. But for some reason, I come here and I'm like, you guys need to think I'm cool. And that God thing, that is not cool. And so actually, just to kind of, so we'll put a pin in 46, and believe me, we will come back to it. So I heard that word God, and kind of like what we were talking about with that idea of like, man, I think I know what you mean when you use that word God. And I don't like it. Anyone here ever come to rooms like this and hear people say God, and you do that? Maybe you didn't. Maybe you got, I'm sure you guys are more spiritual than me, but I came to that assumption. I know what you mean when you use that word God, and I don't like it. And I would do this thing. I'm sure it's not anything that you guys would have ever done. I would just make that assumption and run with it, because I didn't have the courage to ask you. I wasn't going to ask you what you meant when you used that word God, because that would mean starting a conversation. And if I start a conversation with you, you might ask me a question that I don't got the answer to. Like, how's it going? You know? And so I can't ask you a question. So I'm going to run with that assumption. So keep in mind, little old Paige, I'm attached to this idea of being cool. God's not cool. And I don't like what you mean when you use the word God. So early in my sobriety, I figured out a workaround. And anytime in this, not anytime, but almost every time in this book, I see that capitalized word. That can be a word that I use instead of the word God. If I really, really do struggle with that word, I can use other words. And so what I did was I used the word, well, it's two words. I used the words higher power. That's what I did. And I used the words higher power because they were kind of what the cool kids were doing. You know what I mean? They were using higher power, and it was hip, slick, and cool. Keep in mind, never in my life have I ever been hip, slick, or cool ever. But I'm going to use those words, higher power, because I'm going to be cool. And I don't know if you guys are aware, but higher power, it's two words. It's a whole lot of syllables. Like, I haven't even bothered to count them. And I got tired of that real quickly. I am an efficient alcoholic. And what I mean by that is I burnt my life to the ground efficiently. So if you guys are wondering, you know, all Pages, she's really young. Yep, don't you worry. My life was on fire in a dumpster, careening off a cliff quite efficiently. And so what it turns out is I like efficiency in my sobriety too. And those words, higher power, that wasn't very efficient. So I settled for the word God because it was efficient. And you know what I did? I took that word to prayer. I took that word to meditation. I took that word to through my 12 steps. And that word no longer began to mean what I assumed you meant when you used that word. That word began to mean what I had experienced as the result of these 12 steps. And of course, it's step 2. I do need to start with belief, not belief in, belief that there is. I need to start with just a little bit of belief. But I don't need to fully understand. I don't need to fully comprehend. It's really about what I experience. See, the power that is on offer in 12 step is not about belief, about knowing, about head knowing. It's not about thinking. It's not about intellectualizing. It is about experience. And it is what I have experienced as the result of these 12 steps. So that word began to mean what I experienced. And so as I talk about the second step, what I want you to know is I will use that word God. I will. And because I didn't have the courage to ask, what I will share with you is that when I use that word God, what I mean and what I truly mean is a conception of a power greater than yourself that you are the most open to. That is what I mean when I use that word. And then it talks back on page 46. I know that was kind of a tangent. We're going to bounce around. Please bear with me. It says, we looked upon this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. We looked askance, so skeptically, at many individuals who claimed to be godly. And I don't know about you guys, but when I came to the rooms, I came with stuff. I came with stuff that had happened to me. I came with stuff that had happened to me before I started drinking and using. I came with stuff that had happened to me in my alcoholism. I came with the deep shame and guilt and remorse of the things that I had done. And there was some stuff that had happened to me in sobriety. And I came with that, if there is a God, why? You know what I mean? I was going to use the word befuddled, is literally the word that was going to come out of my mouth. Unironically, I was going to say I was befuddled. I don't know what's wrong with me today. But I was trapped with this idea, you know, if there is a God, why? And I was wanting the answer to the question, why? Why did these things happen to me? Why did I go through this? Why am I an alcoholic? Why? And I can't answer necessarily your why, but what I can do is I can share the answer that I found for my why. And what I look at it is I look at my alcoholism as being like lost in the middle of the desert. You know, I know that there's at least one person who's hopping in and out that knows the deserts. You know, I lost in the middle of the desert. If you know things about deserts during the day, it's that scorching, blazing heat. You know, it's on you. Let's be real. Look at this complexion. I don't do well in the sun for long. You know what I'm saying? So imagine I'm out in this desert. And I'm run out of food. I'm run out of water. I have had the sun on me all day. I'm burnt. I'm sore. I'm tired. And now the night's starting to come. Dusk is starting to settle in. And one of the things about the desert is when night settles, it gets cold. And I know I'm not going to make it through that night. I'm not going to make it. Now, in that moment, I'm given a map. And that map is this book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And that map gives me clear-cut, precise directions on how I can get out of the desert and into freedom. And in that moment, it is far more important that I grab a hold of that map and follow its directions to get out than it is to figure out how I got there in the first place. And there's some people that know me and be like, how did you get into the desert? See, wheels don't do good in sand. You know, it would really be a mystery for somebody like me. But the answer to why, and here is what I did. When I came to that fourth step, and more than one fourth step, what we started at is we look at resentments. And what I did was, you know who I put in column 1? God. Column 1, God. Column 2, some of those whys. I had to look at some of those things that had happened to me, put that in column 1, put that in column 2. And as I went through that stuff in the inventory process, I began to get freedom from it. When I sat down with God and another human being in that fifth step, I began to really see that I wasn't so alone. And as I went out and made amends for some of the things that I had done, some of the things had done to me, and it wasn't, but the things that I had done, that guilt and that shame, it began to fall from me. And man, that's always the process that I find. The guilt and the shame, it falls. It falls. The defects of character, they fall. The more that I seek God's will in my life, that's a whole nother tangent. But the true answer of why, the true why is answered for me when I sit down with another alcoholic and I take them through this book and I take them through this work. The answer of why is because I get to sit down with them and I get to say, yes, me too. Yes, me too. I drank that way. Yes, me too. I felt like that. Yes, me too. That happened to me. Yes, me too. I did that thing. Yes, me too. I went through that. I experienced that. Yes, me too. And here is how I got freedom from it. Here are the actions that I took. Let me help you. And one of my favorite, this is not in the agnostics, but it's in the chapter, The Family Afterwards. One of my favorite sets of paragraphs, one of my favorite pages is 124, where it talks about how my dark past gets transformed into my principal asset. And in God's hands, that stuff that I wanted, that I was drinking behind, that stuff I wanted to kill myself behind, that stuff becomes gifts and blessings that I get to use to help another person. I get to use to help another alcoholic. Man, that is my why. Because the more that I've gone through and the more that I've experienced, the more useful I am to others. And in the third step, I made a decision. Now, I'm all over the place. I'm not even talking about 2 right now. I'm talking about 3. But in the third step, I made a decision that I am working for God. I'm no longer in the management position of my life. I am to fit myself to be of maximum service to God and the people about me. And I have some sponsees in this meeting. They will tell you, not once, when I sit down and I work with them and I meet with them, not once do they give a crap when I'm like, listen, I was really well organized today and I'm doing these things really well. They don't care about that. You know what's useful to them? Yes, me too. Yeah, I've failed and fall short and I've done that too. Yes, me too. And here's how I got freedom. You are not alone. That's what's useful. It's really that stuff. They're like, oh, nobody's like, oh, that's so exciting that you were able to, do a thing. No, it's what I failed and fallen short on. That's what it is. And when I just want to talk about that idea of a punishing God. Because so many of us come with that idea that I am bad and I'm being punished. And I just want to share with you what my experience has been with the loving God that I've found here. And this is my experience. And it really is when I am working with others. See, when I sit down with another person and I'm receiving their fifth step, and I'll ask, what is that thing that you didn't want to tell me? What is that deep, dark secret? And they share with me that thing that carries that guilt and that shame. They share with me the thing that happened to them. They share with me the thing that they did. They share with me the thing they didn't want to tell anyone. They were going to go to their grave with. They share with me the depth of their shame. How I feel about them changes. It does, but not in the way that I would expect. I love them more. I love them more. I am a fall down failure of a human being. I'm pissing my pants drunk behind a dumpster on my own power. I can't overcome any of my defects of character. I can't overcome my resentments, my fears. I can't have a sex ideal that I live up to. I continuously fall short. I am without power. And yet I, this fall down failure of an alcoholic, love them more. And without question, I know I am not doing better than God in the love department. And if that is how I feel about them, and if that is how I feel about you, just imagine how the conception of a power greater than yourself, at least one that I have found here, might feel about you. That's what's on offer. That's what's on offer. And I don't need to understand it, and I don't need to comprehend it. At this point, I just need to believe that Paige had better things to do today than come here and lie to you guys about God. That maybe, just maybe, I'm not BSing you. And there are other things that I could do, that I'm telling the truth, that this is my experience, and that maybe none of us are that special, that we could be excluded from that grace. Going back to page 46, and it says, how could a, capital S, capital B, supreme being have anything to do with it all? And who could comprehend a capital S, capital B, supreme being anyhow? And that was something that I really struggled with. See, I came to the second step and I thought I was supposed to have a spiritual awakening on step 2. I thought I was supposed to know God. I thought I was supposed to have a relationship with God. I thought I was supposed to be walking hand in hand on the beach with God. I'll live where there's beaches. I don't know why I thought that. We don't got beaches out here. We got prairies. You know what I mean? But I thought I was supposed to have this experience of God. I thought step 2 was supposed to be the spiritual experience. But it could not possibly be. The spiritual experience happens at step 12. In many ways, all I am simply doing is believing, is a spiritual awakening possible? Is it possible? Now, the chapter is entitled We Agnostics. Not to the agnostics, not for agnostics, not the agnostic afterwards. You know what I mean? It is we agnostics. And one of the things I want to point out in our modern language, agnostic often means sort of like a fence sitter. Like maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I'm not sure. I'm agnostic. But I love, and again, I was the last minute fill-in speaker. I'm so sorry, guys. I love the origins of words. I'm a nerd about etymology, and it's like, oh God, she's going to the etymology portion of step 2. Oh no. This is on Steve. I'm joking. But when we look at the origin of the word agnostic, it is Greek. And in Greek, the ag means without, and the gnosis means knowing or knowledge. And so it's not two goes without knowing. It is we without knowing or knowledge. And what I want to point out about that word agnostic, it is not, the good old-fashioned, if you have sponsored, you know what I'm talking about, the good old-fashioned alcoholic I know. When you offer a spiritual suggestion to a sponsee, or maybe you are the sponsee, I'm sure I'm more than guilty of this. The good old, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know, right? We're familiar with that, right? That's what we're talking about. Is not that intellectual knowing. The word gnostic or gnostic, if you've ever heard of books that are gnostic, what they're all about is that heart level experiential knowing. And oftentimes, now bear with me, this is a bit of a metaphor. I really look at it like my relationship with God as a relationship. It's like dating. And all I'm doing in step 2, I'm just making that initial approach, believing that there's a relationship to be had, believing that maybe marriage is possible. Now, at first, it's a little awkward and it's a little uncomfortable, just like dating, right? Just like prayer, like meditation, like it's a little awkward and it's uncomfortable. But the more I take that consistent action, the more it becomes what I get to turn into. Right? Turn into for that unconditional love. I think I have that in my brain because you put agape, right? In the chat. Yeah. That agape, that love of God, that's what I'm after. But for those that are in a relationship, a relationship does not progress if I do not talk to the other person in the relationship. And if all I do is talk, the relationship is not going to progress. I also need to listen. I also need to invite and include and spend time with and get to know. And so at step 2, I don't have that experiential knowing of God. I don't. But you'll notice in step 11, it says that we seek to improve our conscious contact with God. Conscious contact. Now, the word conscious, its origin is Latin. So it's a random Greek, Latin, not the same. It's a coincidence, or is it? But the word conscious in origin, con means with, and the shus or sire is knowing. So I come from we agnostic step 2 without that knowing, that heart level, relational level knowing, to step 11, improving my with knowing of God. And how do I go from without knowing to with knowing? These steps, 4 through 9, essentially, continuing that in step 10. Those are the actions that get me from that place of having no knowledge, no relationship, to building and deepening and developing that relationship. That's the view I take. If you take a different way, that's totally cool. But I was working with somebody before this meeting, and we're talking a lot about the AA history. And there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Carl Jung, and he gave us knowledge of what our solution is. Our solution is a spiritual awakening, is a spiritual experience. Man, it's hard for me not to go through all the history dealing. He's working with Roland Hazard and then boop-a-doop-a-doop. It's real hard for me to just talk Carl Jung. He believed that there was certain people like alcoholics who needed to overcome their illness, a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening. And he gave us knowledge of what our problem is. Now, Carl Jung, there's this famous BBC interview with Carl Jung. And in it, they asked him, they say, growing up, did you believe in God? And he said, yeah, growing up, yeah, I did. I did believe in God. And then they said, well, do you believe now? And he says, no. And there's a pause. And he says, I've got no need for belief. There's another pause. And he says, I know. That is the knowing that is on offer in step 11. That is the knowing that I'm after. But I could not possibly experience this knowing at step 2, right? In this meeting today, I've got a lot of wonderful friends and loved ones that are in the United Kingdom. In step 2, all I'm believing is that the United Kingdom exists. That like England, Scotland, Wales, like that it's real, that the British Isles are a place. Could you imagine my unmitigated goal if I showed up to this meeting and said, no, it's not real. The UK is not a place. It doesn't exist. Heck, you know how I know? Scotland, the national animal of Scotland, it's a unicorn. It's an imaginary place, right? You'd be like, what are you talking about? I live here. This is where I live. That's really what step 2 is about. Believing that place exists. Now, I haven't been there. I've been there on Zoom a whole bunch, but I've not ever been there physically. I've not traveled there physically. So I will say I do have a gauge of the weather and the Nando's and the Aldi's and the Asda's and the, all that stuff. I got a gauge of that, but I haven't ever been there. I've not ever traveled. So I'm just trusting that some of you guys aren't lying about it, And what I am doing is I'm believing it exists. Now, what we're going to see is in the third step, I'm stealing from step 3 a little bit. In the third step, I'm just believing. Or I'm just making a decision to go. I haven't gone yet, right? In step 1, how I look at it, if I stay in Canada, I will relapse. That's step 1. Step 2, the UK, it exists. Step 3, I'm deciding to go. Heck, that's it. I've decided. I hope I can crash with some of you guys. I'm coming. Woo! Coming to the UK. Woo! You'll notice I'm still here. I haven't moved. Nothing has changed. So if I do not follow that decision up with action, I will remain right here. And that's what I'm called to do, to follow that decision up with action. I don't have the spiritual awakening in step 2. That's the point I'm trying to make. I have it as the result of the steps. So I don't get to the UK just because I want to be in the UK. I could desperately want to be in the UK, but that won't get me there. Consistent action. I have a passport. I'm on top of that. I got to book a plane ticket. I feel like I might need a visa, but I haven't done a lot of international travel. I got to get some paperwork. I know that at least. I then have to get to the airport. I have to get through security, and then I have to get on the plane. Now I know how this is going to go. I'm probably not going to have a direct flight. I'm probably going to have to stop over in Toronto. We got to be Canadians, you guys know. Stop off in Pearson, then transfer and go on a flight across the Atlantic. And only when I land, probably London Heathrow. I feel like I don't want to go on Gatwick. That's what I'm avoiding. I don't know. I wasn't listening. London Heathrow, right? I'll land there, and only when I'm there am I in the UK. And so that's what it's like here. I'm not expected to know or understand. I'm just starting with a sliver of belief that there could be a power greater than myself. And that is how I go from the not knowing to the knowing. That is how I go from without knowledge to that experiential knowing, to that spiritual awakening. And then back on page 46, it says, when it says, how could a supreme being have anything to do with all? It says, yet in other moments, we found ourselves thinking when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. You know what opens me up to the process of belief in a power greater than myself? Experience. And the experience that I've been kind of sharing again and again was my experience. I saw that you guys were happy and sober at the same time, even on weekends. Took me a little while to believe that like weekends were happening. I don't know why. I went to meetings on weekends, but it took me a little while, right? To believe. That's all I had to believe. But I look at it, and what opens me up is experience. And I'm privileged, even though we don't have beaches, I am privileged to live where I live in the world, because I live right by the Rocky Mountains. And there's something that happens in the Rocky Mountains, like it's some of the most beautiful landscape on earth, and go for a drive and be out there and just in awe. And there's something that opens us up. And so many of us talk about just being opened up to something in nature. And often that's what it is. It is experience. And so I'm just going to read that next paragraph, because it says, yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. If I've had these barriers to belief in a power greater than myself, I am not alone. Let us make haste to reassure you. Let us quickly, hey, it's okay. You're not alone. We've gone through this and we can overcome this. We have found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice. What is prejudice? Prejudice is just a belief an old belief that I have no experience with. Can I lay aside those old ideas that I might not have had experience with and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves? We commence to get results. So I just need to believe that maybe there could be a power greater than myself. It says, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that capital P power, which is God, I don't need to define it. I don't need to understand it. All I need to believe is, could it exist? Now, if I go across the page, this is step 2, part 1 in our book. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there's a capital P power greater than myself? That says, as soon as a man can say he does believe, or is willing to believe, I don't even have to have full belief. I just have to believe that I'm willing to be open. Heck, I'm willing to believe that you're not lying to me about your belief. I don't have to fully understand or believe what you believe, but that you believe, that's a start. As soon as a man can say he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically, so with emphasis, assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, this idea, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. I need a spiritual life that is effective. But that cornerstone is that stone that is symbolically laid upon which a structure is built. And my spiritual life, you guys know Winnie the Pooh? I might think, and you guys remember Eeyore's shack, where it's a bundle of sticks that are leaned up against each other? I don't have to build a structure like that. I can build a cathedral. And if that's a visual that doesn't work for you, that's cool. But imagine the most beautiful, incredible, there are some wonderful, beautiful, breathtaking churches, mosques. Like, that's what my spiritual life can be. I don't need to settle for Eeyore sticks. I've also heard it said that I'm like Tigger from Winnie the Pooh, because I bounce around the big book a whole lot. So I wasn't expecting to make that metaphor today either. Just all over the place. But it's upon that cornerstone we get to build the structure. And I'm just kind of aware of the time. I think I got about 10-ish or so minutes left. So I might not go through as much of the book as I intended to. But what I want to talk about is at least maybe one, maybe two metaphors. And then I'll close with the second step proposition. So that's the first step. Second step proposition. We'll close with the second. But throughout this chapter, it's using a lot of logic and reason and science to get us to change our mind about that power which is God. Because often our arguments are, it's not logical, it's not reasonable, it's not scientific. And we're using those examples of how we believe something, we're given a good reason and changed our minds. And we're showing how our logic tends to not be the best. And, it's talking about the Wright brothers and Professor Langley. And actually, if you want to follow along a little bit, it's page 51, where the bottom paragraph where it talks about, we're afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Did not all efforts at flight fail before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? And see, I would read this stuff and I'd be like, what the heck does this have to do with God or my alcoholism? Like, it made no sense to me. And so I just want to explain it because it's a beautiful spiritual metaphor. So Professor Langley and the Wright brothers, they were in a race to build the airplane. And Professor Langley, he was this guy who lived in Washington, D.C., and he was given $50,000 by the U.S. Army to make an airplane. He called it an aerodrome, which I think is a way cooler name. The aerodrome, woo, rock and roll. And so it was on a boat in a river in Washington, D.C. called the Potomac. And he had it on a boat and he was going to catapult it and then it was going to fly, which this is just metal. Like, rock on, dude. Professor Langley, go, right? And it launched and then crashed into the river. And Professor Langley was a man who had all the money, and he's not a bad guy, and I kind of hyperbolize the story a little bit. But Professor Langley, he had all the money, he had all the resources, he had everything that you could possibly have to build an airplane. He had self-will. Just like I had self-will when I came here, and nothing that I could ever do could build me that spiritual airplane. Nothing in and of myself could allow me to overcome that alcoholism, to overcome that insane thought that I had to take a drink. I was trying to Professor Langley my way through life. And it crashed. And so we believe that man could never fly. There's no way that could ever happen. But these two bicycle repairmen in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, just on a little beach. They were on a beach, a field by a beach. They built this airplane, and it flew for maybe 7 seconds, maybe 11. It flew for shorter than most airplanes had ever flown for, or shorter than most airplanes are longer. You know what I mean? Like, we have airplanes that are longer than their initial flight. That's what I'm trying to articulate. Doing the best I can. The lack of words might be a sign to wrap it up here quickly. But it talks about how they were men of faith. They had faith that they could build an airplane. But in that moment, before they had the airplane, they did not have the airplane. They had belief that they could. That's what step 2 is. I don't have the airplane. I don't have my spiritual life in place. I'm just believing that an airplane exists. Now, the advantage that we have over the Wright brothers is I see you guys, another kind of flight. I see you flying spiritually. I see you happy and sober. I see you facing life in ways that I could have never imagined. I see you. And all I need to do is believe that if I take the actions you have, I too can build an airplane. Again, it's a lot like showing up today and saying, airplanes don't exist. I love how we got a person with an airplane like on their picture. You know what I mean? It's not real. It's not a thing. Could you imagine going to your Ryanair or I can't think of another international airline, Air Canada, or like any one of those, and be like, sorry, I don't believe in airplanes. They don't exist. And it's like, as it flies over, right? That's what it's like. And I haven't built it yet, but the steps are what are going to allow me to build that airplane, to build that relationship with God. And what I want to talk about is the second step proposition. It's on page 53. And it says, middle paragraph, when we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could not postpone or evade. How did they know? Also rude of them to call me out on that with it being self-imposed. Rude. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that God is everything, or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What is our choice to be? And that's a tough choice. Now, that was for me. But here's how we can reconcile it. How I can reconcile it is, what do I believe is bigger? Do I believe the spirit of the universe is bigger? Or do I believe, and I'm gonna like kind of make it a little obvious, which is bigger, my rinky-dink little problem with drugs and alcohol, do I think that is bigger, or do I believe the spirit of the universe is bigger? That power that works in your life, do I believe that's bigger? I kind of got to say yes. What you guys have is bigger. But then it asks the question, I feel like it's important for me to answer that question as is. Is God is everything, or else God is nothing? God either is or isn't. What is my choice to be? And I can look at my life and I can say, have I ever had any experiences of God? Have I had any moments where I've been in awe and wonder and felt the presence of a power greater than myself? Have I had, by seconds and inches, any periods in my life where I should not be alive today, where I should not be sober today? By seconds and inches, I should not be here. Any moments of God? Or do I believe that you guys have had moments of God? And if I can believe that, I cannot say, if God is everything or else God is nothing, I cannot say that God is nothing. I am left to say that God is, and that God is everything. And if I can say that, I can take that second step proposition. And I do this whole, I don't have time for that whole talk. I have this whole story where I talk about the power of God is everything and God is nothing. But just very quickly, what I will say, God has been with me in the mountaintops as much as in the valleys. God has been with me in those moments when everything's great, in those moments of beauty, in those moments of, you just see the sponsees light come on in their eyes. God is with me. And God has been with me in those worst moments of my life in sobriety. God has been with me in those moments of unexplainable agony. God has been with me. And with that power of God that I've been able to tap into, to access, to let flow through me, as the result of these 12 steps, I'm able to use that stuff for good again and again and again. I'm going a little over time, bear with me. I have a phone call with somebody after this meeting who's going through some health problems. And the privilege is he's reaching out to me because I have health problems. I'm in a wheelchair. I have neurological issues. And I only share about it just because I feel called to share about it. I love Zoom because it's one of those things where it's like, spoilers, because it's like, yeah, but no. But if it's an in-person meeting, I can always feel the vibe. It's like, is she going to talk about the wheelchair? Sometimes I don't, just to leave them guessing. But that thing that I thought was the worst thing that could ever happen to me, that thing that I thought was not fair, that thing that was not my will and was absolute, how could that be anything other than God punishing me, is a gift that I can use to give another human being hope and help guide them through their pain. Man, what a gift. And I want you to know I am far more useful because of the wheelchair. I've had and there's been more gifts from it than I could have ever imagined, but I couldn't see it because I was stuck in self and self-pity. And man, I needed to do this work to clear that away, to get that lens. But what I want to talk about, and actually this ties in real well, I planned this way. Ties in so well, I planned it. I didn't, that's a lie, I didn't. Page 56, we're talking about our friend Fitz Mayo. He's my homie Fitz. I love this guy. It says our friend was a minister's son. So here are Fitz Mayo's barriers to belief in God. He grew up Page 56, he grew up having religion shoved down his throat by his family. He attended church school where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. So he had it shoved down his throat all through school. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration, business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. These calamities, this is what calamity is. These hard, heavy life things. And I'm not excused from them because I'm recovered. And I'm not excused from them because I'm doing this way of life. These are things that happen because it is part of life. It is part of the human condition. It is part of the human experience, and it is not easy, but those are serious, hard, heavy things. Those calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment after the horrors of the First World War. What's the point of all of this? Ever more serious alcoholism, impending and mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. Those are his barriers to belief in God. And those are real barriers. I'm not minimizing. I'm saying those are real barriers. I hear you with that. And if you have barriers, I hear you. I'm not minimizing. And it says, one night when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known, look at that word, known, a spiritual experience. Going from without knowing to known a spiritual experience. Our friend's gorge rose, and I love that. I need to use in conversation more. Why, this has aroused my gorge. You know, it's what it's saying is he was getting angry. He's getting like, man, get off my back. As he bitterly cried out, if there's a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me. But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible? And is it possible, man, that opens us up. Is it possible that all the religious people I've known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Who are you to say there is no God? This man recounts that he tumbled out of his bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the capital P presence. God is a verb, presence of God. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide and flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the capital P presence of capital I, capital P, capital L, infinite power and love. He stepped from bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious, with knowing, companionship, like a friendship with his creator. And what I want to say is sometimes I'm in rooms where people will read Fitzmayo's experience and I'll hear, oh man, you know, you can't expect to have an experience like Fitz, or you can't expect to have a spiritual experience like Bill. The best we can hope for is an educational variety. And what I want to say, and I'll watch my language, is nonsense, because they use that in the big book. Nonsense. I could not stay well on one drink. I can't stay well on one experience. And the spiritual experience that I have is absolutely none of my business. And I have had experiences like Fitz's. And if I had settled for the educational variety, I would have sold myself short. I need to continue to grow and to seek and to have and to awaken to the reality that is God's love. And I have had those experiences. And I'm always called, not once in my life did I sell the power of alcohol short. There wasn't a single time that I came to that power that was alcohol. I did not think it would not solve my problems. I did not think it would relieve for me the struggles that I was going through. Not once did I doubt that power. I'm called never to sell the power of God short. And actually, I'll end on this. I know I've said I'll end on this like 100 times. That's the biggest lie we hear in 12 step. What's the biggest lie? I'll end on this, and on and on and on we go. But I'll end on this. See, if I'm here at this meeting today, and I don't think I have the capacity for faith, and it talks about this in We Agnostics. It talks about, hey girl, we got faith, we didn't realize it. But if I don't know if I could have the capacity of faith that we're talking about here, what I'll ask is, has anyone here ever taken a floor pill? If you don't know what that is, that's a pill that you found on the floor. All I'm saying is if you've got any experience with that, you can do this. You can do these steps. You have faith. Now, what I will point out is if you have ever taken a car floor pill, if you don't know what that is a pill that you found on the floor of a car. Girl, you can make that amends, no problem. You have faith. So what I want you to know is that stepping from that bridge to shore, that leap of faith is not as big as we think it is. Thank you for the opportunity to share and to be of service today.